Hello, so today we are going to continue on problems from Leetcode Daily Challenge of May. So the problem today is design underground system. So basically what this problem asks us to do is that we have an underground railway system that is keeping track of the customer travel times between different stations. And we are using this data to calculate the average time it takes to travel from one station to another, okay? And basically this class will have a function to check in, so we get the ID of the customer, the station name they arrived at, and then the time they arrived at. And then we have a checkout function that will give us the ID of the customer again, the station name they arrived at, they are going to check out from, so this is they check out in this station and then they check out at this station. So this is the start station basically, and this is the end station. And we get the time here as well. And then we have another function called average time that returns a value. In this function, we don't get the ID of the customer, we just get the start station and then the end station. And so what we want here is to get the average times for all customers that went from this station to this station, okay? So basically the average time of the trips from this station to this station for all customers, okay? And you can assume here, this is important, that the check-in and check-out are consistent, which basically means that a customer checks in at a time in one station, they will check out at another time later from another station, and those time would be, the first one would be smaller than the second one. So basically a consistent chronological order, right? So that's sort of the idea here. Now let's see how we can tackle it. Okay, so how do we tackle this? So we have the check-in time that happens first for an ID and for a station. You can call it start station. Okay, and then later we have the checkout time. So how do we get the duration of this trip, right? So let's call this end station. Well, it should be easy if we had recorded, if we record the start station and the ID here. So here we get also the time for each, right? So let's call this start time, let's call this end time. So here we can actually record the duration for the trip for this ID at this point. How do we do that? Well, we can just have maybe some sort of a map. Let's call it a map of the time or of the duration. And then for that map, what do we need as the key and value? Well, let's have this record the duration for a trip from start station to end station. From start station, let's call it, to end station. So what should be to do that, let's make these two the keys. So let's call the keys the start station and then the end station pair. So this would be a pair. Now what should we add as a value? Well, the easiest thing to do is just for every customer, just add the duration, right? Now the question becomes, how do we get the duration? So how do we get this duration here? Well, the duration we know of a trip is just going to be the end time of that duration minus the start time. We already have the end time. How do we get the start time? Well, we can just record it here so that we can get access to it, okay? How do we get access to it? Well, it's going to be the same ID that checks in and checks out. And so let's actually just do that. So in here, let's call it the start map, and let's record for this ID, let's record the station, the starting station, and the time. Which means that here, to get the start time, it should be easy to do, right? It should be just by accessing the start map. And so let's just do that here. So it should be, to get the start time, we should just get from that map what we stored earlier, which is going to be using the ID. And what's the position for the start time? It's position 1. Okay, and how do we get the starting station? Well, similarly, the starting station, since we already recorded it here, we just get it from the start map, right? We just get from the start map, we get, using the ID, we get position 0 to get this start station. So put position 0 here, okay? And that's pretty much it, right? Now that with this, what do we have? With this, we will have for each customer, we'll have the duration of the trip, right? We can just access the using the start station and end station pair, we can get the duration of all trips that happened between these two stations. And so how do we get the average time? Now it becomes easy to get the average time, because the average time is just the sum of all these duration divided by the length, right? Because the average time of a list of numbers is just their sum divided by their count. And that's what we can do here. The average time is by the start station and then the end station. And so we can just, using our time map, we can just get the start station and end station, right? So this would be basically all the times, let's call it TS. Then the average time is just going to be the sum of this divided by the length, okay? So just to reiterate here, what did we do? We have this map called time, where the keys are the pair of the start station and the end station, and the values are the duration of all of the trips by customers from this station to this station, okay? And so to get the average time between two stations, we just get the sum of the duration of all their trips divided by the length. And the main key here is that to calculate the duration here, we need the start time, and so we'll code the start time in a map here so that we can access it here and get the duration, right? And the duration is just going to be the end time minus this start time, okay? That we stored from the check-in function. And that would be straightforward. Now, what's the time complexity for each call? Well, here for the check-in function is going to be O of n. O of 1, because we are doing just one operation. Here we are also doing one operation. These all are one operation, so it's O of 1. For the average time, it's also just one operation, so it's O of 1. So you can see, using these maps, it makes it really easy. In terms of space, we are using this map here. We are using this time map as well. So two maps, each of them is at most O of n being the number of calls, by the way. So it's O of n space. Okay. Now, the reason we are able to just get the start time using the ID here, and we are not worrying about the ID getting overridden, is because the problem guarantees that it's going to be consistent. Let's say even if a customer checks in twice, right, we only care about the latest time, and so that's why we override here. Okay, and we are guaranteed that this duration won't be negative, because the problem says the end time is always going to be bigger than the start time. Okay, so that's just something to note here. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Now let's code it up and make sure it passes. Okay, so let's code up the solution we just saw in the overview. So we said we need a map for the start time, and so this is going to be basically just ID. The key is going to be the ID of the customer, and then the value is going to be the station, right? Let's call it the start station, and then the time, or the start time, okay? And then we need the overall time that will calculate the duration of all the trips, and we'll use a default dict here because we want it to be a list, right? So that by default it's empty. And so here the key is going to be the pair of the start station, right, and then the end station, and then the value is going to be the duration of all trips from this start station to this end station, okay? And so now it should be easy to just apply. So for this start station, what we want is we want the ID as the key, right? That's what we said here, and the value to be this. And so start station here, which is just this station name, and then this is the time. Now for the end station, we want to first get the start station and the end station from the ID, right? So we get those from the IDs of the customer. And now it's easy to get the duration, because we can just get the the key first, which is, we said, the start station, end station, and then we append the duration, which is going to be just the end time minus the starting time. Okay, and you can see the way we got the start station is just the value at 0, which will give us the station name, and then at 1, which will give us the time, which is the start time. Okay, and now it's easy to calculate the average time, because we can just first get all the durations, let's call them durations, from start station to end station, and we can now just get the sum divided by the length. So let's call this the sum divided by the length. That should give us the average here. So if we run this, yeah, the only problem here is that let's call this end station, this start station, and just to make this super clear, let's call this start station here. And now we should be, looks good, right? Let's submit. And this works, okay? Now, one thing you notice here is that this is a map of lists, right? And so we actually don't need an entire list for each one of them. We can instead calculate the sum and the duration in a pair here of just a pair of values, and then at the end we can just divide. So instead of keeping the list and then calculating the sum and the length, we'll calculate the sum and the length as we go using this. So how do we do that? Well, first we need to change this to be a lambda of 0 and 0. So it's going to be 0 and 0 initially, because by default the value here is going to be not the duration of all the trips. It's going to be just the sum of all the durations, right? And then the length of all the durations, okay? And so what that means here is that using this key here, right? Let's call this our key, just so that this is super clear. Okay, and so this would be our key. And so we just add this as the sum, right? And then we want to increment by 1 here to increment the length. But this is the first position, right? We have the sum in the first position and then the length in the second position. So let's put that here. So this should give us the sum of the durations here and then the number of durations here. And so now it should be easy. We could just first get the key here. So our key would be like this, right? And now we can just, from the time, get the sum, which is at position 0, right? So let's grab it. And then the length, which would be at position 1. And that should be it. And now you can see this, for each key, it has just one slot and not a list, right? Just one value, just 2 values and not a list. And that passes as well. Yeah, so that's just a small optimization there. But still time complexity is similar. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this problem. Please like and subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye.